Okay, today talking about circular bar charts. The what here is a circular bar chart takes a concept we've used a lot, the bar chart, pretty simple, and tries to make it a little bit more visually appealing by twisting it around a point. So we're going to set up a bar chart pretty similarly to how we've done it in the past, and then we're just going to add a different coordinate structure to it to stretch it around almost circular, well, thus circular bar chart. So it is a type of bar chart that works really well if your bars tend to be units of time, so weeks, months, years, something like that. And it can make otherwise a boring bar chart visually interesting. Why? You may have noticed I'm not really high on these bar charts. They're boring. There's not a lot to them. Person can get the point of a bar chart in a glance, which is both the advantage and disadvantage of them. There's not a lot of point on lingering on them, and the story that they can tell is overly simplistic. So how do we make them more visually appealing? Well, here's one way. We can change the coordinate point in the coordinate plane around them. It's really simple. The way that we're going to do it, we'll do it over in a screencast, and you'll see pretty easily pretty quickly how easy it is. So to set up this circular bar chart, you have to have a little bit of background here, and that is late last fall, before this college basketball season went so horribly wrong for dear old Nebraska U. I was listening to the Omaha World Herald's Half Court podcast, the college basketball podcast that they put out, and this was after Nebraska had lost its first game of the season to a baseball school, UC Riverside. And something that the Husker beat writer at the World Herald, Chris Hetty, said was, November basketball doesn't matter, but it shows you where you are. And I thought that was a kind of an odd expression. I was questioning whether or not November basketball actually really did matter or not. So I decided to look into the data. So let's do that. Let's answer that question, and we'll do that with a circular bar chart. So I'm going to load up two libraries here, Tidyverse and Lubridate. And Lubridate is a library that makes it easier to work with date formats, and I'll show you why that's important here in a second. So load those up. I'm going to load up all of the data from the 2020 season here. And I just noticed I should fix that in the book. So here is the 2020 season data through the end of the season, which, ended abruptly. So it's kind of a weird year. But, let's ask the question, does November basketball matter or not? We can argue that this is a weird year. There weren't a lot of dominant teams. There were a lot of unknowns going into the tournament before the tournament got canceled. So let's take a look at this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow some code from the 18th, chapter 18, and change the wins to ones and the losses to zeros. I'm also going to filter out games before a certain period of time. This is a previous thing that I did to filter out tournament games, but since there were no tournament games, we can delete that. Don't need it. So we're going to create something called win-loss logs. Then I'm going to let's just create a data frame called dates. And we're going to look at win-loss logs. We're going to group it by the date of the game, the conference that it was played in, and we're just going to add up all the conference's wins on that day. So we'll be able to see by day how many teams in different conferences won games and what the total is. So we'll get a line that's really, really tall if the conference won a ton of games. And we're also going to use this as a stacked bar chart. So we run this. This is going to take a few minutes because there are a lot of dates and a lot of games. I've got a lot of conferences here and a lot of colors. So I'm not so sure what this is going to look like. But let's just start out. Let's just assume that this is something that we're interested in. The fix here, the way to make it a circular bar chart, is this bit right on the end here, chord puller. We have done chord flip, where we flipped the coordinate points of a chart to flip a bar chart on its side or something like that. Chord polar makes it circular. So if we run that, here is what the circular bar chart, eventually, there's a lot of stuff going on here, so this takes a minute or two. Here's what it looks like, which by day, not great. But one thing that is interesting is that when the regular season gets going, you can tell that there are games regularly on a given day, and that most every team in the conference is playing. My guess is that's Monday or Saturday. So a lot of games going on those days. So clearly we have too many conferences here, and none of these conferences really matter. So let's just do the Power Five. Let's just do the SEC, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the ACC, just for something to do. I mean, there's probably better basketball conferences that we could have looked at. If you're a Creighton fan, go to hell. I don't care. I don't care about Creighton basketball, so we're not going to include the Big East. But you could if you wanted to. You can change it if you want to and look at it. I don't care. So now what we're going to do is, instead of doing this by day, let's maybe do this by month. Since we're looking at November basketball, let's do this by month. And this is where Lubridate comes in handy. So I'm going to create a data frame called wins. I'm going to use win-loss logs, and I'm going to mutate a new field, and it's going to be called month. And I'm going to get that month by using a function called floor date. And I'm going to take my date column where the games are, and my unit is month. So what a floor date does is it makes all of the games in a given month occur on the first day of the month. So all the games that occurred in November are going to be labeled November 1st. All of the games that occurred in December will be labeled December the 1st. And it's going to store it in a month column, which you can see from here on our chord polar. That's going to work pretty well. It's already grouping them by months anyway. Let's group those games by the month thing that we just created in the conference. We're going to summarize it up by wins-loss, and then we're going to add this filter, conferences in the Power 5. So if these Power 5 conferences, what does that look like? We look up here. My wins now only has 25 observations, and when I run that chart, here's what it looks like. A lot of games in November, fewer in December and January and February. So does November basketball matter? Well, there's an awful lot of wins going on in November here. Makes me wonder. Obviously, March, there weren't a lot of games in March in 2020, so not a lot of them got played. So this is kind of misleading. But December, there's fewer basketball games anyway, just because of the holidays. But I don't know. These are awfully big. This is looking suspiciously like a pie chart, and we all know that that's an instant F in this class. So floor date allows us to change the unit that we're looking at. So let's just take that exact same code that we just ran and change the unit in floor date to weeks. And what that will do is create a week value, and we can look at the Power 5 by week. And now this is what we get. Here's the beginning of November. As November goes on, the number of wins in the Power 5 goes up. Then it starts to shrink, but also the total number of games begins to shrink. Here is the Christmas holiday. There's not a lot going on. There's a spate of holiday tournaments that go on after that. And then we get into conference play after that, and it's all pretty even, the number of wins, because they're basically playing each other. So does November basketball matter? Well, if you look at this chart, the answer is, yeah, it kind of does. If you think you want to have a tournament resume, you kind of got to rack up some wins in here. Is who you beat and how much you beat them by in here really matter? Well, that's another question. But the total number of wins that you're getting in these months matters for your tournament resume. So that's a circular bar chart. They're pretty easy to do once you get the bar chart set up. It's just adding this chord polar. But as I said, it really works well when your X value is some kind of date value. And you're looking at this almost like a clock face. And this is the beginning, and it turns around like a clock face, like hours on a clock hand. So something to think about, something to make your bar charts a little bit more interesting. There's an assignment on there, but you're pretty set up for it. All right, good luck.